I'm going to sign an executive order mandating evacuation of Zone A areas. I'm also ordering that all of the city's public schools be closed on Monday.
Everyone's saying, crap, this isn't going to happen. You know, the weathermen always get it wrong, and we're just going to hang out and not really pay attention to this. Please don't. Okay, we have to be prepared for the worst here.
You need to take this very seriously and follow the instructions of your state and local officials because they are going to be providing you with the best advice in terms of how to deal with this storm over the coming days.
Hurricane Sandy is gaining strength as it bears down on the East Coast. I'm Peter Latman reporting for Business Day Live. We'll be looking closely at the potential impact of the storm and keep you updated with all of the latest news. First, let's start with Matt Flegenheimer from our Metro desk to see what's happening in and around New York. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me.
So we heard Mayor Bloomberg earlier talk about the very aggressive steps that New York City has taken here. How have things worked out so far?
I sense that it's going reasonably well. You know, the city and state officials really got out in front of this. The word Mayor Bloomberg used was selfish. If you stay behind, you're being selfish because you're putting the lives of first responders at risk. They'll come get you. You're not going to get arrested, but it's a selfish thing to do to make them go back in. Particularly to train resources to that instead of other first response efforts in the city.
Right, and they made the decision in low-lying areas in New York City, so Battery Park.
Battery Park, lots of lower Manhattan, the Rockaways, Red Hook in Brooklyn, Coney Island, areas that are potentially vulnerable to the storm surge that's expected.
And we saw a high tide this morning. It's not supposed to be as bad as it will be later this evening, but did we see any flooding earlier?
There's been a little bit of flooding in parts of lower Manhattan. You could see that the Esplanade in Battery Park City is really entirely underwater at the moment. Other parts of Brooklyn as well, you've seen some flooding. But again, later today is when it's expected to really come.
And you and I trudged into work today, and it's really extraordinary. I mean, the subways are closed, buses, there's no buses, there's taxis.
It's a ghostly city.
It really is.
It is. People, taxis were very much available today. Somebody said on the Upper East Side, it's the easiest it's ever been to get a taxi. And actually, I think some of the drivers are excited to sort of prove their worth as a transit option. It's sort of a more efficient way to get around today because the subways are out.
And you know, we were talking before you came on about the timing of this storm. And you know, while this is a bigger storm than Irene, as far as the weather is concerned, the timing of it also makes it possibly worse as far as the local economy is concerned.
Sure. For Irene, there was this unprecedented step of really killing the entire subway system, taking it offline. This happened at noon on a Saturday last year. And by the Monday workday, Monday morning, a lot of the service for buses and subways was restored. Today we're talking about a full workday essentially shot for mass transit in the city. Tomorrow is looking very likely as well.
Yeah, do we have any way to handicap tomorrow? So I know there's another press conference from Bloomberg later today.
There is. I imagine he'll give an update. But yesterday morning, Joseph Lota, who's the chairman of the MTA, said that Monday and Tuesday both looked like very difficult days. He hoped by Wednesday to get some service back. Whenever sort of 12 hours after the storm is, he thinks that's when the service will start to come back in some regard. But again, they're looking at possible flooding of the system as well, which they certainly could cause some delays as far as getting back online.
Right, and schools are closed as well. Kids, including my own, are home bouncing.
Schools are closed today. I don't think there's been a decision made regarding tomorrow. Mayor Bloomberg is expected to update this later on this morning and this afternoon. But yes, kids are certainly home today. It's a sort of veritable snow day.
Yeah, and it does seem to me, you know, first of all, with Katrina in 2005 and then with Irene last year, that it does seem like local officials and state officials are really getting out ahead of these storms now and being very aggressive and taking measures to prevent any calamities that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think the sense is, you know, they'd rather over-prepare than under-prepare. Mayor Bloomberg was criticized in the past for not responding forcefully enough to a blizzard. Certainly the responses for President Bush during Hurricane Katrina, I think public officials have sort of trained themselves to say, we're going to make every effort to inform the public and really get out in front of this, and hopefully the public will respond.
Thanks a lot for coming on, Matt.
Thank you, Peter.
With a storm of this magnitude affecting one of the most densely populated areas of the United States, insurance and reinsurance companies have a lot at stake. We're joined now by Tom Larson of catastrophe risk modeling firm EquiCat. He's in San Francisco. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on so early, and I assume that congratulations are in order for your San Francisco Giants, who won the World Series last night.
4 wins in a row. It's very exciting.
And you know, here in New York, we have other concerns, and that's what you're here to talk with us about. Tell us about the potential insurance impact from Sandy, and possibly put it in the context of other storms that we've seen in the past.
Sandy is a very large storm impacting something close to 20% of the U.S. population. We expect economic damages from this event to be somewhere from $10 to $20 billion. That range is somewhat bounded. Irene, we estimated about $10 billion in economic damages. And Ike from 2008, that impacted the fourth largest city in the country, Houston, caused about $20 billion in economic damages. It's a very large, very severe storm.
So, and one of the things you had mentioned earlier is the breadth of this storm geographically, right? So you mentioned an earlier storm, say, focused on Houston, or Irene had a real impact on Vermont and areas of upstate New York. But the geographic scope of this storm seems somewhat jaw-dropping.
It is. Extending from southern New Jersey, it's about a 200-mile stretch of coast that is expected to have close to hurricane force winds through the next 24 hours, and extending all the way to Harrisburg. That's quite a large area and quite a large population.
And what areas of insurance will be most affected by this, Tom?
Well, the most likely, the biggest one is going to be the homeowners. They're diverse and spread throughout the area. They're going to be impacted by all of these events, and we're going to see a lot of losses distributed among a lot of insurance companies. There will be some hits on some of the more commercial carriers, but they'll be less distributed, more focused, and harder to estimate.
And if we could just talk about catastrophe bonds. First of all, help us understand exactly what those are and how they can be possibly triggered in a situation like this.
Well, to put it in context, we're estimating $10 to $20 billion in economic damages. That translates to $5 to $10 billion insured losses. The insurers, to minimize the volatility in their book, they'll buy reinsurance, and catastrophe bonds are a form of reinsurance for those insurers. They'll be triggered by a variety of mechanisms. Some of them are indemnity, lost directly to the insurer. Some will be index related, and either off the weather or off of a market loss estimate. They'll be triggered. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and if you're an investor, once the markets do open up, is there any way to think about this in terms of specific companies that might be impacted, or how might viewers want to think about that?
It's impossible to actually estimate, which specific insurers will be impacted. The types of losses that we're going to see that's expected from Sandy is a lot of very low-level, roof torn off here types of losses, attritional, that'll be spread over a very large premium base. It's very difficult to be able to pick out that losses from any one insurer.
Tom, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Well, thank you, Peter.
The storm is already having an economic impact. U.S. stock markets are closed and businesses have been shut down along the Atlantic seaboard. For more, I'm joined by business editor Larry Ingrassia. Hey, Larry.
Good morning, Peter.
How you doing?
Okay.
Good. So yesterday, you and I, business journalist geeks like you and I, were watching very carefully how the stock markets would decide whether to stay open or close tomorrow. And it was sort of a fascinating evolution throughout the day. Help us understand what happened.
Well, it was interesting because initially they said, well, the market's going to be closed, the trading floor is going to be closed, but electronic trading will continue and it'll be open. So you had this weird situation. I was quite puzzled by it and actually a little bit surprised because, they've had a lot of issues with electronic trading, as we know. What's the upside of doing that, when you have a skeletal crew on?
Right.
Things could go wrong. There could be greater volatility. For all you know, some program traders might want to take advantage of it. We know kind of they're all nice guys, but that happens from time to time. And yet, kind of the upside is what? You're open for trading one more day. There are a lot of trading holidays. We have holidays throughout the year.
Right. Right. It seemed like ultimately discretion proved to be the better part of valor.
But not until very late in the evening did they actually decide that they weren't going to do the electronic trading. I think it was around 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and it sounded like from our colleague Michael De La Merced, who did a lot of reporting on this yesterday, that there were a whole bunch of conference calls between the various regulators And I guess they ultimately threw up their hands and said, you know what, ultimately this is just not worth it.
Right. The one question is not just today, but tomorrow. Kind of if the brunt of the storm is going to come sometime today or tomorrow, will they, close trading tomorrow? And then when you have a little bit of a longer delay, then you have pent-up orders, whether they're buy orders or sell orders, and you might have a little bit of a rocky opening when eventually it does open. I think that probably is on their mind a little bit. But, I think discretion was the wise thing to do today.
Yeah, and, earlier we were talking to an insurance expert, so presumably, the insurers will be heavily traded when the markets ultimately do open up. But, the last time we had an extended close of the New York Stock Exchange, of course, was after 9/11.
Right.
And
3 days, as I recall.
That's right. And the circumstances were obviously much different, and there was tons of volatility, and it's obviously understandable why that was. This time around, there's a lot of other concerns. It's sort of hard to see how the volatility will be.
This short term, except maybe in certain sectors. I mean, look, kind of the broader issues, much more important, much deeper, are things like the fiscal cliff that we face, coming at the end of the year with the budget impasse in Washington. And of course, there's the continuing European economic crisis. You might have, kind of what's going to happen with airline stocks. Obviously, they're going to, their traffic is going to be hurt a little bit. Retailers are going to lose a few days. Although with each of those, I would think that some of that business that's lost today, tomorrow, is probably going to be recovered. If business people put off trips, kind of they were planning to make, they'll make it a little bit later.
Right.
If you're going to buy something, you'll buy it in a few days. Now, again, it might be a little bit of a loss, but I'm not sure the impact is going to be that significant in major sectors.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And then, of course, once the markets do open up, we'll have less than a week to go before the election. And I think traders will be looking ahead at the result of that.
Another thing which they're watching much more closely, I think, than a one-time event.
But here in New York,
because that's going to be a 4-year.
Right. Right,
thing.
but here in New York, Goldman Sachs' trading floor, Citigroup's trading floor, they're in these low-lying zones.
Well, look around us, kind of,
right.
There are a lot fewer people around.
Right, it's quite desolate, and everyone's working at home today, so it's sort of a couple of days off for Wall Street, more or less.
Yeah, but you can get a lot of work done at home nowadays with computers.
That's true. Thanks for coming on, Larry.
My pleasure.
Finally, the storm's effects are also being felt outside of New York City. Brian Stelter is reporting from Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. He's on the line now by Skype. Hello, Brian.
Hey there.
Terrific. It's great to have you. So I've been following you on Twitter for the past 24 hours as you've camped out down there in Rehoboth Beach. What's the latest?
I just went for a drive through town, and we're starting to see water piling up on the roads. We're starting to see the ocean come through the dunes in a few spots, all the stuff you'd expect to see. What's strange about this storm, of course, as you talked about earlier, it's so large that we're talking about something that is only in maybe the first inning. Maybe the second inning is the best analogy for this.
It's amazing.
High tide later today is of much more grave concern here, because that's when the storm will be much closer to Delaware. I'm pretty much as far north of Delaware as you can get on the ocean before you get to New Jersey, which is where we'll probably actually see landfall. And already we're seeing photos out of Atlantic City, for instance, of giant wooden boards floating through the streets near the beach. I think we'll see more of that as the day goes on, and especially in the evening as high tide hits again.
Yeah. Now, Brian, is it kind of one of these things where it will ebb and flow? You mentioned high tide. Did we just see a high tide over the past couple of hours? So what you saw in Atlantic City or water in Rehoboth Beach on the streets, will that recede, and then later this afternoon or into tonight will again be more problematic?
It will. It's pretty much receding now here, because the high tide here was around 8 a.m. In fact, I was surprised about half an hour ago we had another surge of water over the dune onto the boardwalk, and it was sort of surprising because we thought that it had passed for a little while. So we may see a continual buildup of water, but for the most part, the high tide cycles will drive the damage from the storm surge for the next 24 to 36 hours here.
Right.
It's pretty eerie in town, by the way, that nobody here except for the crazy people in the media that stick around, and of course emergency responders who stick around. Everybody else has gone home, and it's quite a change from Saturday night when there was a lot of trick-or-treating going on downtown.
and up here we've seen very aggressive moves by state and local officials getting out ahead of this storm. Down in the Mid-Atlantic, has it been very much the same?
It has been the same. In Delaware, the governor ordered all cars off the roads at 5 a.m. today. There's also a curfew and a driving ban up in New Jersey and in the county that includes Atlantic City. So we're seeing those sorts of actions being taken with exceptions for emergency officials and for other essential personnel.
Now, I know, if I'm correct, you grew up in Maryland, went to college in Delaware, so this is your neck of the woods, and you've always had a passion for weather. So just rank this in terms of what you've seen in previous storms. Is this sort of the worst that you have seen?
I mean, for a second inning of a storm, it seems fine. I think what's going to be more notable is the duration of this thing. So in 12 hours, it'll probably seem much more severe. In 24 hours, it may seem much more severe. Already, though, down in Ocean City, Maryland, which is where I vacationed for the last 25 years, 26 years of my life, the boardwalk pier there has been pretty much demolished by the waves. They say part of it is still standing, but most of it's been taken down. And the fact that that's already happened in the second inning of this storm, I think that's what makes the storm so notable, is that it's going to go on for such a long time that it's not, those piers are being taken out already is not a good sign for the rest of the coast.
Wow. Well, good luck and stay safe, and thanks for coming on, Brian.
Thanks.
That's all for now, but we'll be here at 1 p.m. with further updates. I'm Peter Latman reporting for Business Day Live. Thanks for watching, and we're going to leave you with some locals and tourists preparing for the storm's arrival in Times Square.
Well, we don't get hurricanes normally in the UK, so it's an interesting experience.
I thought it was a little quick to shut down the subways.
I feel like it's a bit of hype. The way it feels now, there's nothing going on.
I don't know really what I'm gonna do because public transportation is gonna be closed.
The bridge was windy. The bridge was pretty windy, but it's great with no traffic.
So what are you gonna do the rest of the day?
Hang out, I guess, and watch the weather.